There are moments in sport that don't announce themselves. They don't come with fanfare or dramatic music. They just arrive, quietly, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. And by the time you realize what you're watching, it's already happening. This is one of those moments. And if you haven't been paying close attention to what's been building inside the women's draw at Wimbledon over the last 72 hours, then you've been missing the most compelling story in tennis right now. Because something is about to collide on center court that this sport genuinely did not see coming. Not the bookmakers, not the analysts, not even the people who've spent their entire careers studying this game. And the strangest, most unsettling part of all of it? The warning signs were sitting right there in plain sight the entire time, for anyone willing to actually look. So, let's look. A year ago, on English grass, not far from where she's standing right now, a 20-year-old walked off a court carrying something heavy. Not a trophy, not a runner-up plate, something worse. She had just played a final that went all the way to a tiebreak in the deciding set. The kind of scoreline that doesn't just end a match. It lodges itself somewhere behind your ribs and takes up residence. The kind of loss that follows you into hotel rooms, into training sessions, into quiet mornings when you're not expecting it. She has admitted in her own careful, understated way that she couldn't bring herself to watch the replays for months afterward. Not weeks, months. Some losses fade with time, with distance, with new results that paper over the memory. This one didn't. It waited, patient, quiet, heavy. It sat in the back of her mind like an unanswered question. That question finally got its answer 2 days ago. Her name is Alex. She's 21 years old, and 48 hours before she's due to walk out onto the biggest court of her entire life, she stepped onto a side court at the All England Club, carrying that year-old memory like a stone in her chest. And by the time she walked off, she had done something that very few athletes ever actually managed to do. She had reached back into the worst moment of her career and turned it into a weapon. But to understand what that means and why it matters so much heading into what's coming next, you need to understand what she walked into that match against. Maya didn't arrive into her match against Alex quietly. She arrived the way a storm arrives, on the kind of momentum that changes careers overnight, that makes people reevaluate everything they thought they knew about a player. Because in the round before, Maya had done something that almost nobody in this sport expected. She had beaten Serena Williams, not a faded, ceremonial version of Serena playing out the final chapters of a long goodbye. Serena the entire tennis world had been watching with held breath, leaning forward in their seats, whispering to each other about whether there was one more chapter left in the greatest story the sport has ever told. Maya wrote a different chapter. She closed the book, and she carried every ounce of that momentum, that adrenaline, that borrowed belief, straight into the court against Alex. For one full set, it looked like the story was going to write itself in exactly the direction everyone expected. Maya broke serve early. She controlled the rallies. She dictated pace, dictated position, dictated everything. The first set went 6-3, and if you were watching live, you could feel the narrative forming in real time. Too much pressure, too big a stage, too heavy a history. Here we go again. The crowd could feel it, the commentators could feel it, probably even Alex could feel it, somewhere in her body, that old, familiar weight starting to press down. And then came the changeover. The cameras couldn't capture it. Nobody in the stands could see it. But something happened in those 90 seconds between sets that had been building for exactly 1 year. Something shifted. Something settled. And when Alex walked back onto that court to begin the second set, she was a completely different player. She stopped reacting to Maya's rhythm and started imposing her own. She tightened her geometry on the court. She began taking the ball earlier, stealing preparation time before Maya could settle into her patterns. She started coming forward at moments nobody expected, turning defensive positions into attacking ones. The second set didn't just go her way, it disappeared. 6 games to 2. And then came the third set. And this is the point where it stops being a tennis match and starts being something closer to a statement. 6 games, 0 for Maya. A bagel, delivered on a Wimbledon court against a player who 72 hours ago had ended the comeback of a living legend. Final score? 3-6, 2-2, 0-6. This wasn't just a win. This was Alex reaching back exactly 12 months, finding the version of herself that had been sitting in a hotel room unable to watch her own highlights, and finally letting her rest. And here's the detail that tells you everything you actually need to know about who this young woman is. Stitched into the brim of her white visor, long before she ever stepped onto the grass, was a phrase in Tagalog, a phrase that translates roughly to this: once it grows, it cannot be stopped. It wasn't there for sponsors. It wasn't there for the cameras. She's talked at length about what it means to carry her culture, her country, her identity onto the court every single time she competes. That phrase wasn't decoration. It was a promise, and you cannot coach that kind of clarity. Either you have it or you don't. She has it. And now, everything she's built across this grass season, the Birmingham title, back-to-back top 10 wins in Berlin over players ranked deep inside the world's elite, back-to-back victories here at Wimbledon, including a comeback that ended in a statement bagel, all of it is about to collide with a name that carries more weight than almost anyone else alive in this sport. The defending champion, the woman who won this exact tournament 12 months ago, the woman who, under almost any other set of circumstances in almost any other year, would walk into this third-round match as a near certainty to walk out the other side. But this is not almost any other year, and the deeper you look into the champion's 2026, the more unsettling the picture becomes. It started in Miami, an opening round loss to a fellow countrywoman that would have seemed genuinely unthinkable a year ago, the kind of result that doesn't just cost ranking points, it costs confidence. It costs the quiet, settled certainty that the very best players in the world carry onto the court like a second skin. Within days, she and her longtime coach had parted ways, a split that had been building clearly beneath the surface for longer than anyone outside the camp was willing to admit. A new team was assembled, built around one of the most decorated coaching minds in the sport, a fresh start, a reset. It was supposed to steady the ship heading into the clay season. It didn't. Not fully. She fell in the Australian Open quarterfinals, she fell in Stuttgart, and then came Madrid, where the season took its darkest turn. A mid-match retirement in the third round, trailing an unseeded American, tears visible as she walked off the court, her body simply shutting down on her. She revealed afterward that a virus had taken hold, dizziness, blurred vision, zero stability. It was only the third retirement of her entire career. For someone whose defining characteristic across a decade at the top of this sport has been almost inhuman composure and physical resilience, that image of her leaving the court before a match was finished, struggling to walk a straight line, landed harder than any scoreline could. And then came Roland Garros, her fortress, the place she has dominated for years in a tier so far above everyone else that the rest of the tour seemed to be competing for second place. The place where she has won 4 times, where opponents walk onto the court already half defeated by the weight of her record on that particular surface. She lost in the 4th round, in straight sets, to a player who on paper had no business taking her apart that convincingly. And if that wasn't signal enough, her grass court warm-up told the same story. An opening loss in 3 sets in Bad Homburg, her second consecutive defeat to the same American opponent. She arrived at Wimbledon having not won a single title anywhere in 2026, the first time that has happened across an entire half season in longer than most fans care to remember. Her opening match here told an even more complicated story. A dominant first set, a completely lost second set, a genuine battle just to survive into a third. For a player who has spent years being the most composed, most controlled presence in women's tennis, that kind of visible, public inconsistency tells you something important. The pressure isn't some abstract talking point anymore. It's real, it's physical, it's sitting on her shoulders every single time she walks out to compete. Her second round match looked cleaner on the scoreboard, but even that had more to do with a mismatch in quality than any convincing return to her best form. So the real question heading into this collision isn't whether the champion is dangerous. She is always dangerous. 6 Grand Slam titles don't evaporate because of one difficult season. The real question, the one that actually matters, is which version of her walks on that court. The one who has been quietly unraveling under pressure all year, or the one who has spent an entire career finding her best tennis at the exact moment when everyone around her has already decided she's finished. Here's what makes this match genuinely different from every other time these two have shared a court. They've played each other twice before, and the results were almost perfectly split. 15 months ago, in Miami's quarterfinals, Alex won 6-2, 7-5. She didn't win it by accident or by fortune. She won it by standing inside the baseline, attacking second serves before they had time to settle, refusing to allow the champion to dictate rally length the way she prefers to. She took time away. She forced chaos into a player who thrives on controlled, methodical precision. A month later, on clay in Madrid, the champion answered. Came from a set down, 1-3, 1 win apiece. Hard court to the underdog, clay to the champion. And now, for the very first time, they meet on grass, a surface neither has ever used to test the other. This is where the tactical picture becomes genuinely fascinating, because grass doesn't distribute advantages fairly between these two styles of tennis. The champion's greatest weapon has always been a forehand loaded with heavy topspin, the kind of shot that kicks up violently on clay, stealing an opponent's preparation time, arriving at the body with a force and angle that players spend entire careers trying to solve. On grass, that same shot behaves differently. The bounce stays lower, the kick flattens. She has to adjust, has to flatten her own ball striking, has to lean on her serve as a primary weapon and stabilizer in a way she rarely needs to on other surfaces. And here's a detail that the data quietly confirms. Across their head-to-head history, Alex has been the marginally better returner of the champion's second serve than the champion has been of hers. A small edge, but on this surface, on these courts, small edges are everything. Now look at what Alex actually does on grass, and it reads almost like the mirror opposite of the champion's game. She hits flat through the court rather than over it, taking the ball early in a way that demands split-second timing and absolute precision. Timing she has been visibly, deliberately sharpening across this entire grass season. Her left-handed serve creates an awkward skidding angle into the body of right-handed opponents, a geometry that is difficult to read on any surface and genuinely disruptive on a fast one. And she has been coming to the net more aggressively in these past few weeks than at any other point in her career. Those serve and volley sequences in her last match weren't improvisation or instinct. They were a calculated, rehearsed decision, specifically designed to break the rhythm of players who thrive on long, controlled baseline exchanges. Players, in other words, exactly like the woman she's about to face. Before anyone reaches too quickly for the underdog narrative and starts writing the fairy tale, let's be clear about something. Because doing that, crowning the story before the match has been played, would be just as foolish as writing Alex off completely. This is still a 6-time Grand Slam champion ranked inside the world's top 4, a player who has been in more high-pressure, high-stakes, seemingly unwinnable situations than almost anyone active in the sport today, and who has walked through nearly all of them. She has, in her own words ahead of this match, called Alex's game tricky, specifically because it doesn't give her rhythm, specifically because it forces her into patterns she doesn't naturally want to play. That's not a dismissal, that's a warning to herself. She's seen it, she's studied it, she knows exactly what's coming, and the bookmakers still list her as a heavy favorite for a reason. But here's what the bookmakers can't fully price in. Alex has never stood this deep in a Grand Slam before, not once in her career. This is, right now, the first time in the entire Open era that a Filipina has reached the 3rd round of a major singles draw. She is in genuinely uncharted psychological territory. 21 years old, on one of the biggest courts in the sport, in front of a crowd unlike anything Wimbledon has typically hosted. Because the Filipino community across the United Kingdom has been turning Alex's matches into something the All England Club simply hasn't seen before. Flags rising from every corner of the stands, chants building and falling with every rally, every point, every shot. That crowd is not neutral. That crowd is not politely appreciative. That crowd is invested, loud, emotionally present in ways that change the atmosphere of a match, in ways that can't be measured in statistics. Alex manages to break serve early and pull that crowd fully into the match. The psychological weight sitting on the other side of the net becomes something genuinely different to carry, something heavier, something the champion has not had to deal with anywhere else this season. Once this match actually begins, there are 3 specific things worth watching closely, because they will tell you the direction of the entire contest long before the scoreboard catches up. The first is where Alex stands to return serve. If she steps inside the baseline and attacks early, the way she did in Miami 15 months ago, it means her confidence has arrived fully, and the occasion isn't winning the internal battle. If she backs off, even slightly, the moment is starting to grow bigger than she is, and the champion will feel that immediately. The second thing to watch is how deep the champion's forehand is landing in the opening games. When she is dialed in and operating at her best, that shot pins opponents back from the very first exchange, establishes dominance before a rally has properly begun. When something is off, when the timing or the intent isn't quite there, it lands shorter, and a short ball against Alex on this surface isn't just a missed shot, it's an invitation. The third thing, the one that might matter most if this stretches deep into a deciding set, is the champion's second serve under pressure. Her inconsistency in tight moments has been the single most repeated storyline of her entire 2026 season. If that crack appears again on this court, against this opponent, at this stage of this tournament, the consequences are going to be unlike anything she has faced all year. Everything points towards something the seedings and the rankings and the betting markets were never designed to capture on paper. The head-to-head, the surface, the form lines on both sides, the psychological weight each woman is carrying onto that court, the crowd that is going to make that stadium feel like somewhere it has never quite felt before. All of it, every single thread of evidence, points to a match that is genuinely, dangerously open. Not because of hope, not because it's a good story, and good stories deserve good endings, but because of cold, specific, verifiable evidence sitting right there for anyone willing to look at it closely and honestly. A year ago, Alex couldn't bring herself to watch a loss to a dangerous, unpredictable opponent on this same stretch of English grass. Now, she's about to walk out onto the biggest court of her life, carrying that memory not as a wound, not as a warning, but as fuel, wearing 4 words stitched into the brim of her visor in her own language, words that promise, quietly and without drama, that once something starts growing, nothing in the world can stop it. Whether that promise holds up under the loudest, heaviest, most unforgiving pressure she has ever faced is the one thing not even the numbers can answer. Not the data, not the analysis, not the head-to-head record or the surface statistics or the form guide. The only way to find out is the oldest way there is. You're going to have to watch.